I'm David Knowles, and this is Ukraine, the latest. Today, we analyse the latest updates from the front line, report on developments in Georgia, and Dom Nicholls interviews Ukrainian rock band Antytila.
This hideous and barbaric venture of Vladimir Putin must end in failure.
We need a military strategy for Ukraine to gain a decisive advantage on the battlefield, to win the war.
Nobody's going to break us. We're strong. We're Ukrainians.
Every weekday afternoon, we sit down with leading journalists from the Telegraph's London newsroom and our teams reporting on the ground to bring you the latest news and analysis on the war in Ukraine. It's Friday, the 10th of March, 1 year and 14 days since the full-scale invasion began. And today, I'm joined by our associate editor Dominic Nicholls and our senior foreign correspondent Roland Oliphant. I started by asking Dom for the latest updates from the front lines.
Good afternoon, folks. Let's start in Bakhmut in the Donbass. So fighting still continuing there. And this morning, Mikhailo Podolyak has reported, so he's one of President Zelensky's advisor. He's been speaking to Italy's La Stampa newspaper, and he said that Russia has changed tactics. Not sure exactly what he means by that, but he went on to say, quote, Russia has converged on Bakhmut with a large part of its trained military personnel, the remnants of its professional army, as well as the private companies. So I'll just that's the end of that quote, a bit more in a moment. But I think what he means by change tactics is that they are trying to reinforce or trying to back up what they've got going, what little advance they've had there, which is not what they usually do. They've reverted back to the old tactics of pummel a place with artillery and then push the people in afterwards, hopefully in some armoured personnel carriers or tanks or what have you, if they've got any left, which I don't think they've got many of in that area at the moment. So I think he's suggesting they've changed tactics by just ploughing on for very, very little gain. He went on to say, quote, we therefore, as in Ukraine, we therefore have two objectives: to reduce their capable personnel as much as possible and to fix them in a few key wearisome battles, to disrupt their offensive and concentrate our resources elsewhere for the spring counter-offensive, unquote. Now this is in line with what we've been saying for the last few weeks and other commentators. There's no huge, great strategic insight I think we've had to apply there. We've said that Ukraine have decided that this fight, although Bakhmut as a town is not of massive, it's not of strategic importance. It's very limited operational importance. It's a road, crossroads, but it's not a major logistics hub. It produces salt and wine, but hey, that's about it. But what Ukraine seem to have decided to do is that, looking at Russia and seeing the symbolic value of the town, Russia desperate for a victory, and the internal wranglings between the sort of established Shoigu, Gerasimov, MOD and the head of the armed forces of Russia, vice Yevgeny Prigozhin and the Wagner group, there's that battle as well that Russia have decided to play out over Bakhmut. So Ukraine has seen an opportunity here to wear down the Russian forces. So we've said that for ages. I think that's fairly evident. It's odd, though, I think, to see an advisor of President Zelensky to say that's exactly what they're trying to do and to fix them in key wearisome battles, disrupt their offensive and concentrate their resources elsewhere for the spring counter-offensive. I mean, that is what we think Ukraine are trying to do. It's odd to hear them say it. You might think, aha, it's a bluff. They're about to punch through up in Kharkiv or down in the south around Kherson again, or maybe it's a double bluff. And that's exactly what they're going to do, hoping that Russia will move some forces away, thinking they're bluffing. I don't think we need to overanalyze this. I think Mikhailo Podolyak was perhaps a little unwise to say these things, but like I say, you don't have to be some massive strategic genius, not doing us down here, to say that has been fairly evident for some time. So we'll watch that. The meat grinder, as it's been described there, continues. Russia not making any real gains. They've still not been able to close the encirclement around Bakhmut. There's still the open area to the west. And actually, there's reporting elsewhere that suggests that the Russia had got to within about 700 metres of the main road heading southwest out of Bakhmut, and they've been pushed back a couple of Ks, which is an interesting range. Couple of kilometres is about the sort of handheld anti-tank range. That's what you're sort of looking at. I know they go further, but actually that sort of beyond that kind of range, it's you've got to be a bloody good shot, basically. So that's an interesting sort of tactical gap that the Ukrainian forces seem to have managed to push Russia back. So Bakhmut continuing as it is, but it's certainly not. They can't claim victory yet. I know Yevgeny Prigozhin has said that they've taken the eastern part of the town and they've got men in the centre. And yeah, that's all probably correct. But it doesn't mean that the town has fallen. And actually, Russia still view it as has the town fallen. They're looking at it in terms of geography. I think Ukraine is looking at this battle in terms of relative strength, i.e., for all the pain they are taking, it is in their interest to continue fighting because they are massively wearing down the Russian forces, such that if Mr. Podolyak is correct and he said the remnants of Russia's professional army is in there, well, that's exactly the kind of target that Ukraine needs to be wearing down ahead of any offensive. Okay, enough on Bakhmut. What else was there? So the Russian missile strikes of, 2 nights ago into yesterday morning, just to finish off on that. So we think about 11 people were killed across the country, which is a small number, thankfully, each one a tragedy. But, it could be a lot worse because we think they fired 84 different types of missiles, 84 different missiles, including 28 KH-101 and KH-555 and 20 Caliber. They're all cruise missiles. We think they also fired 6 KH-22 anti-ship missiles in the ground attack role, so it's never going to be as accurate as it would be in its primary role, and 2 KH-31P supersonic anti-ship missiles, 6 KH-47 Kinsal hypersonic missiles going extremely fast and coming down at such a steep angle it's almost impossible to shoot them down, and especially with what Ukraine have at the moment in terms of air defence. We think they also used 6 KH-59 guided missiles and at least 13 S-300 air defence missiles, again in the ground attack role. 8 Iranian-made Shahed-136 drones we've talked about, and Ukrainian officials have likely, we think they were being used, the drones are now being used to distract the Ukrainian air defence systems, so to light up the system. So they reveal where they are, but also they are distracted by trying to shoot down the drones and therefore can't have a go at any of the other missiles that may follow on shortly. Now, Ukrainian forces say they shot down 34 of the 48 Caliber and KH-101/555 cruise missiles and 4 of the drones. And Ukrainian Air Force spokesperson Yuri Inyat said that their forces do not have the capacity to shoot down some of the Russian missiles, which we think he's referring there to the Kinsal and the S-300 missiles. So on that, of note today, the first of 2 Patriot air defence missile batteries promised by the US has arrived in Ukraine. It's going to be some time before it's operational. This was reported in the Financial Times, but it's going to be some time before it's operational and deployed. And we still don't know even if the Patriots can have a go at the Kinsal hypersonic missile for the reasons I suggested a moment ago. But what I would offer is just a thought on what this means for air defence and missile attack. Blanketing your enemy with missiles of any nature, including hypersonic. Russia's using this as a tactic to firstly try and wipe out Ukraine's critical national infrastructure, but also to break the will of the people. And it's not done either of those things. I mean, of course there are blackouts and there's water supply problems around the areas, but they've shown amazing resilience in getting systems back online, and it certainly hasn't broken the will of the people. So I just wonder if what we're seeing here over successive months now of these pulses of air attack, whether the sort of mystery, the boogeyman status of some of these weapons is being removed. When Russia tests a hypersonic missile, I'm thinking like a couple of years ago, and it all hits the press, and we go, "Oh my God, they've got hypersonic missiles. These things can't be defeated." Well, they might not be defeated, but if they are not hitting their targets, even if they get through, if they're not hitting their targets, or even if they hit their targets and it doesn't knock out, it doesn't have an operational or strategic effect, I just wonder if they've lost their mystery. Question for another time, probably. But I just think what are these repeated air attacks by Russia actually achieving, if only to show that they're not as effective as Russia would want them to be. Just finally on the update, Georgia. So Georgia's parliament had voted today, Friday, to drop the controversial legislation about foreign agent registration, expecting NGOs, media organisations, anyone who gets more than 20% of their funding from overseas would be expected under this proposed law to register as a foreign agent. And it's seen not only as that a way of sort of clamping down on free speech, but also shutting off the country, and it's a direct mirror of what happened in Russia, and is seen as a sort of the shallow end of that direction. So it was voted down today. Now there were more protests last night, it had been promised by the time of the protest last night, it had been promised that it would be voted down in all likelihood, but there were still protests. So yes, they were protesting against the bill because it hadn't yet been rubbed out. But I think, and I'll be really interested in Roland's view here, I just wonder if this is actually the protesters now seeing a bit of momentum, seeing a window of opportunity perhaps, seeing Russia potentially distracted, seeing that this is their moment. I mean, the citizens of Georgia have you can look back decades to say they're trying to throw off the influence and the yoke of Russia. And I just wonder if this is they're seizing now a potential moment to try and do something, and that these protests will continue. But I've got a few other bits and bobs to talk about later, but I'll just I'll take a pause there and be interested in Roland's thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that, Dom. As you said, we'll come back to some of your other things, some of your other updates and interviews later. Roland, can I come to you just firstly on Georgia? Would you like to add anything to that? And I was just also interested in your thoughts as to, well, how do we know? I mean, how is this being seen in Russia at the moment? Do we have a sense of that?
The events in Georgia and Russia are being seen, depends who you ask, but I mean, Margarita Simonyan, for example, the hawkish director of Russia Today, one of Putin's most loyal propagandists, said in her Telegram channel today, she basically threatened a nuclear strike on Tbilisi, saying, if there's a repeat of 2008, you'll remember, it was when Russia and Georgia went to war. Russia won. In the Russian narrative, that was because Georgia unprovoked attacked the breakaway region of North Ossetia. Georgians and a lot of their Western allies say, well, they were actually gradually provoked into that by the Russians. The Russians wanted this, and all about Russia punishing Georgia for seeking join NATO. So it's this kind of narrative, in Russia about how it's the Ukrainians, the West, trying to own a second front against us, as it were. And of course, that's not official rhetoric. The official rhetoric from the Kremlin, from Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, was this is nothing to do with us. We have absolutely nothing to do with that bill, but I would advise people not to get too involved in violent protests. So the Kremlin, as usual, kind of sounding relatively sober and above it all, but it's propagandists very much talking about second front. We've seen this before. Looks like another color revolution, etc., etc. I think in the context of the war, it's inevitable they start talking in those terms. Is it another second front? I mean, there's obvious direct parallels here with many things that have happened in this part of the world over the past 20 years. Not, of course, Euromaidan in Ukraine in 2014, because it's about Europe in a way. The reason people came onto the streets in Tbilisi, it's about this foreign agents law, which, as Dom said, reflects the Russian foreign agents law, which came in a decade ago in the aftermath of massive anti-Kremlin protests, and that was basically used to silence opposition. It was used to outlaw human rights groups. It was used to effectively intimidate and shut down independent media. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually, and the law was slowly expanded, and it was used over the years to increasingly kind of browbeat people until finally it's like, we're in violation of this technical detail of this law, you're shut down. So people saw that and they didn't like it. But the thing that seems to be coming out of the protests, when journalists speak to the protesters, is that it's not just about that. It's the fact that, look, this is something that the European Union doesn't like, and we all really want to join Europe. And there's a suspicion amongst the protesters and the opposition that the Georgian government, which has, remember, applied for European Union membership, is sabotaging its own project, perhaps so as not to rock the boat with Moscow. So there's a definite kind of question about the direction of the country here. Are we going to Europe? Are we going to Russia? Do the protesters feel momentum at X? I was asking myself the same question the other night, because when they said we're going to stay on the streets, they said we're staying on the streets until all of those arrested have been released and until Parliament formally votes down this draft law. Well, the Interior Ministry released all of the arrested people last night, and now, as Dom mentioned, the draft law has been voted down. It will be very interesting to see whether there is a fourth night of protests outside Parliament in Tbilisi tonight. And if there is, then I think we can say the opposition definitely feels the wind at its back and feels an opportunity to do something more.
Roland, can I stay with you? Let's go back to what Dom reported earlier about some of the remarks by Mikhailo Podolyak, Zelensky's advisor, when he talked about Russia changing tactics. That's what he told Italy's La Stampa newspaper. Quote, it has conversion of Bakhmut with a large part of its trained military personnel, the remnants of its professional army, as well as the private companies. We therefore have two objectives: to reduce their capable personnel as much as possible and to fix them in a few key Warison battles, to disrupt their offensive and concentrate our resources elsewhere for the spring counter-offensive. Those were the remarks from Mikhailo Podolyak earlier that Dom related to us. You've been speaking to Vadim Pristaiko, the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK. What did he tell you, and how much does that line up with what we've heard just there from Mr. Podolyak?
Yeah, so I was speaking to Ambassador Pristaiko because I want to ask him about kind of Western sentiment and Western arms supplies and the second coming of the grand effect. I mean, it's like waiting for the Messiah or something, isn't it? You know, we're all sitting here talking about one day there will be the spring offensive. So I was asking about that, and I was asking whether he felt that, you know, there'd been something of a dramatic shift, because if we look at the kind of pledges of military support for Ukraine, there's a bit of a spike, you know, over December, January, the last Ramstein meeting in January, really kind of significant in terms of money and other stuff being put on the table. We've all spoken about the tanks, but it's about more than that. It's about a lot more than that. It's Bradley fighting vehicles and support vehicles and other things. Now, he pushed back on the idea that there had been a sudden change. He said, look, there's been a gradual, an incremental shift in perceptions to the point where the West is kind of saying, okay, we want the Ukrainians to achieve something. We've got to do something to make that happen. And the timing of this, you know, this kind of dramatic expansion of aid, that reflects the seasons, the timing, right? So the idea being that by April, the ground will be getting hard enough for offensive actions to take place. That's why Ukraine and the West want all this stuff in play for that offensive to come up, to give them the opportunity to make some kind of progress. And the thing that he talked about, interestingly, you know, he wasn't so focused on tanks or APCs or this bit of hardware or that bit of hardware. He was talking about capability, and he was talking about training. So we all know that Ukrainian troops have been training in Britain. I think the figure was 10,000 last year. They're talking about doubling it to 20,000 this year. That's kind of basic training. Mostly that's kind of that's conscripts, people who've been drafted, coming over to Britain and being put by the British Army through a kind of an accelerated form of infantry basic training, so they're turned out as competent soldiers. But there's something else going on as well. In other countries much closer to Ukraine, that was how Vadim put it, there is more advanced training going on. All this kit that has been promised is not just going to be sent to Ukraine and sent to the front. There's going to be combined arms training. Dom has talked about this since the beginning of the war. The entire orchestra working together, kind of NATO-style training about how to use this stuff all together. So, you know, the tanks working with the air support, with the artillery, with the infantry, so that Ukraine is able to put an army in the field that's able to do these kinds of things, which it hasn't really been able to do before. I mean, yes, the Ukrainian military has transformed and done very, very well, as we've seen over the past year. But it is still, on the whole, it is an ex-Soviet military, and it has its generals studied in the same academies as the Russian generals. You know, those cultures, those ways of doing things are extremely difficult to shift. So the idea is that come the spring, whenever it is, wherever it is, this offensive takes place, the Ukrainians are going to have the techniques and the skills to do something dramatic, not just a bunch of kit.
That's absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Roland. Thank you for tying that back to some of what we've talked to you before. Dom, do you want to come in on that at all, or should we move on?
Well, nothing really to add. I just think, as Roland says, what happens tonight will be instructive. The momentum is everything with these things, as we've seen. And I mean, Russia's already making noises that it's against this type of activity. So I think they can see the danger. They can see what it could possibly lead to. Whether or not they've got, I think, what do we think? They've got about 5,000 troops in Georgia in the two regions. So, but whether or not they could try and do anything if there was a major uprising. But yeah, if momentum peters out, then it's done for now. But I think the next couple of nights will be absolutely instructive.
Thank you very much, Dom and Roland. Dom, can I stay with you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your interview yesterday? It sounded absolutely fascinating. Who were you off to meet?
So I went to meet Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya. She's the leader of the democratic opposition in Belarus. Although she's not in Belarus, she had to flee to Poland. She's now based herself out of Lithuania because if she set foot in Belarus, she would be arrested, as have many of her colleagues, and as has her husband. Her husband was the leader of the party, was going to stand in the 2020 election. Then he was arrested on all kind of trumped up charges. I think they found €900,000 in his flat, that down the back of the sofa or what have you. Anyway, so he was in prison, and Mrs. Tsikhanouskaya stepped up to lead the party. Now, Lukashenko won that. President Alexander Lukashenko won that election supposedly with over 80% of the vote. I think Mrs. Tsikhanouskaya was allowed to have 10% and some sort of minor figures. But it's widely thought that she was the winner. The Democratic forces did win that presidential election. There were riots for weeks afterwards, increasingly violent. Not many people killed, thankfully, but it was a very hard crackdown by Lukashenko. And since then, she's had to run her united transitional cabinet from, as I say, Poland now Lithuania, because just because of the risk. So she was in London, going around the Foreign Office and elsewhere, just trying to keep attention in Belarus and build up support. She says she is attracting attention from the British government, and said there were she had concrete requests for the British government, which included synchronising sanctions with the EU, withdrawing Britain's ambassador to Minsk, which we do have an ambassador in Minsk. And she also wants, in international groupings and meetings, the representatives of Belarus, the official representatives of Belarus, part of Lukashenko's regime, she was calling for them to be replaced in international organisations with members of the recognised democratic forces. And she was saying she's getting a lot of warm words from a lot of countries, but it's a bit like she likened it to the weapons debate for Ukraine. Like everyone's sort of looking over their shoulder, thinking who's going to jump first, who's going to stick their neck out, who's really going to make the play here. And she was suggesting that Britain could become a champion, her words, champion for Belarusian democracy, around which the international community could coalesce. And she said the UK is ready to do a lot. Some countries support this, some support that. There's no clear strategy. We need more coordination of activities of different countries. The UK might be a champion in this. We proposed it. We will see. And she was talking about a window of opportunity, a bit like we were just saying just now over Georgia. She sees the assault in Ukraine as just shaking the entire region. And as James Kilner has mentioned before, this is this trouble on the edge of Russia and the former areas that used to be under Soviet control. I mean, this is what Putin fears, that these areas are just breaking away from what he sees as his sphere of influence. But Mrs. Tsikhanouskaya was saying that there's a window of opportunity for political change as a result of the war in Ukraine. There are internal pressures, partisans, which we'll talk about in a moment. But she said that the system, Lukashenko's system, is built very much in the guise of Russia, and it's just so rigid and inflexible. It can't react swiftly to any external changes, and it's as we've seen elsewhere around the world. It's really stiff and strong and immovable until it suddenly isn't, and then shatters, and there's chaos, but a complete change very, very quickly. So she was saying that they're kind of getting ready for this change, which she likened to, or not likened, but said that when Ukraine is victorious, that will be such a shake of the snow dome that Lukashenko, who's in power basically because of Putin, but in power because of a small band of security around him. But she said that actually the wider security apparatus, both in the military and the police and the kind of local officials part of the bureaucracy of the country, are not in any way Lukashenko fans, and there's no suggestion that they would support him if push came to shove. And so she says it is a very fragile environment that just needs something to give it a good kick. And so we started talking about, what can she do? How much can she influence from outside the country? And she said, it's not a question of her leading or influencing. They're self-starting movements inside the country. We've seen these acts of sabotage. So there have been, since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started last February, there have been over 80 acts of railway sabotage, destroying lines carrying Russian military equipment down to and into Ukraine. And there have been a number of people sentenced, some up to 175 years in jail. A number of Belarusian citizens have also set up a special Telegram channel where they posted photographs of Russian troop movements and so on. I mean, these are very brave acts in the environment of Belarus. So, there's no taking away that there's very brave people there trying to make a stand. And Mrs. Sigurnovskaya was saying that they play a significant role, this partisan activity, and keep Lukashenko constantly looking over his shoulder, because he has to show Putin that he's in charge, that he's suppressed his people, that they don't have the strength to resist, and that every small act of resistance by ordinary people, by the partisans, shows that they're still there, that they've not given up, the flicker, the flame of democracy is still there. They're going to continue the fight, and Lukashenko is always on notice, if you like. Now, she said they are self-organised. Nobody's conducting them. I'm fully supportive of any activity inside and outside Belarus that helps us to dismantle the regime, but we stick to peaceful changes. The acts of sabotage and blowing up the plane, remember, was it 2 weeks ago now, the A-50, the big AWACS, airborne warning and control system plane, the Russian, it's basically you bring your own air traffic control to the party type plane. Russia have, we think, 6 of them, and one was so badly damaged it's out of action at an airfield just outside Minsk a couple of weeks ago. So she said the acts of sabotage and blowing up the plane are not acts of violence. Yes, it damaged some equipment, but this equipment is done to kill people, so I think partisans are doing a great job without any victims, unquote. So that attack on the plane was claimed by an organisation called BIPOL, which is a group of former security officials in the Belarusian system. They claimed it, and they've actually released drone footage of the drone that when it landed on the big radar, the radome on top of the A-50 plane, and then blew up. So she denied knowledge of membership of BIPOL, and she said that she's aware of partisans, but is not direct and doesn't know the people. So I pointed out to her that a chap called Alexander Azarov, who's a BIPOL's self-proclaimed leader and claimed responsibility for that attack, he's actually a member of the United Transitional Cabinet, and he runs the Law and Order brief. So I said, so you can't really say you don't know these people. You do have some links to them. And she just sort of smiled at me and said, they also have the right to secrecy, which I thought was somewhat telling. So, I mean, fascinating conversation. A really intractable problem. I don't think that there's going to be a democratic breakout in Belarus unless and until something absolutely seismic happens, which could be Ukrainian victory, could be Putin being unseated or what have you. But for as long as Putin is powerful and Lukashenko is powerful and isn't buffeted by an external event, i.e. Ukraine, I think it would be very, very hard for the Belarusian opposition to be able to have any kind of breakthrough there whatsoever. Putin simply cannot allow it. He needs to have that sphere. It would deny him the claim that he's reimagining the Soviet Empire or what have you. Plus, he needs the territory. He needs the territory to threaten Ukraine. He needs the territory to train his troops and fire all the missiles down into Ukraine. He also needs it because of Kaliningrad, the little Russian exclave that's sort of sandwiched up between Lithuania, Poland, and the Baltic Sea. So Belarus, the Siviliki Gap, the area, I think 60 or 70 k's between Kaliningrad and Minsk, that gap is crucial for keeping Kaliningrad going. And if Minsk were to embrace democracy and turn away from Putin, then it would just basically make Kaliningrad untenable. So Putin has to have Belarus. He has to have a compliant Lukashenko there, and therefore any kind of uprising, unless it happened very quickly and was done and dusted before Russia could get its act together and get the tanks over the border, I can't really see that happening. Now, I was speaking to some officials a couple of days ago in London about this, European ambassadors who wish to remain anonymous for now, but they were saying how if they would hope that certain external influences, like, I don't know, CIA, SIS, Germans, whoever, would be speaking to Lukashenko saying, look, pal, you know the game's up long term. You can keep your money in your bank account, which may or may not be in a Central European country. Just looking over the office here at the legal department, you can keep your money. We might even give you a bit of more money. Costa Rica, Honduras is lovely at this time of year. Why don't you go and Saudi Arabia? Why don't you go and make your life there? So unless something happened very, very quickly and Lukashenko was gone and there was a very quick transition of power, I can't really see the Belarusian opposition, democratic opposition, breaking through there before Putin was able to act, unless something had happened in Russia already. So it was very interesting to meet her. Definitely one to watch, especially for the partisan activity in Belarus. But ultimately, I think she's a brave lady with a very tough job.
Well, thanks very much, Dom. I've no idea why you'd refer to the Czech Republic like that, but who knows. Just a quick note to our listeners. If you want to learn more about Belarus or hear more of our interviews and work on it, we did do a 2-part episode with Professor David Marples, an expert in Belarus, from a couple of weeks ago. And we also spoke to former Belarusian diplomat Pavel Slunkin, I think about 3 weeks ago. We can try and put these in the show notes. If you want to hear more about what Belarusians and experts on Belarus think is happening there. Dom and Ronan, can I get your very final thoughts? What will you be looking at over the next few days, over the weekend? What do you think our listeners should know? Dom, why didn't you start?
Yeah, so today, Rishi Sunak, Britain's Prime Minister, is meeting Emmanuel Macron, French President Emmanuel Macron. Their first summit, well, the first of these two guys, first summit, British-French Franco summit at this level since the pandemic and since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So a lot to talk about. They're going to talk for ages about migration and the small boats in the channel and all the rest of it. They're also going to talk about Ukraine, and it'll be interesting to see what they come out with there. I mean, France, for all the way that we love bashing France, obviously for obvious reasons. It's great sport, but I mean they're fantastic allies. Britain and France are the only European P5 members. France is a nuclear power. I mean they're major world players for all the grief that we give them. So this is a huge a relationship, one of the most important relationships Britain has. It's good to see these two people talking. I hope they talk a lot about the leadership regarding the war in Ukraine and what might happen next and come after, and not just focus on small boats. But yeah, keep an eye on that. That'll be breaking over the weekend, and we'll obviously talk about it on Monday.
Thank you very much, Dom Nicholls. Roland Oliphant.
Yes, I think the periphery of the old Soviet Union and the periphery of Russia is worth keeping an eye on at the moment. And we talked about Georgia, and obviously that episode that might be over for now, but we don't know. It's worth watching that. Moldova this morning was pushing back at the claims from the breakaway region of Transnistria that Ukraine was orchestrating a terrorist attack or something. So no, the Russians are trying to mount a coup there. We saw kind of pro-Russian protests there a few weeks ago. And we've just obviously been talking about Belarus. I mean, these are all places to watch. I think they are potential. The Russians are talking about a second front opening in Georgia. I mean, I wouldn't think about a kind of a second military campaign, but these are definitely places where this grand confrontation, it will play out in certain ways in political competition. Of course, it's all linked together because really, in very broad brushstrokes, this entire crisis and the war is about the aftermath of the fall of the Soviet Union and the path that those countries are going to take, and Russia's attempts to resist losing its influence over these areas. So definitely keep an eye on those. Returning back to the backfield on Bakhmut, I mean, I feel that Bakhmut is still very much on a knife edge. I was quite curious about President Zelensky's decision, because it was earlier this week, to say, look, I've met with the generals. I met with General Zaluzhny and his colleagues, and they all said they want to fight for Bakhmut, so we're going to keep on fighting for it. I mean, I wonder, because as Dom was saying, the narrative from the Ukrainian side is we are tying down Russians there, and we are killing we're killing more of them than they're killing of us, and that's going to pay off when we bring in all these reserves later and we haven't been brought into a trap. I think the Russians are trying to do the same thing, quite honestly. I mean, I think they're quite pleased that the Ukrainians are putting so much into holding on to this city. And there seems to be at least a thought or a train of thought reading between the lines on the Russian side that they can bleed the Ukrainians white, that the Ukrainians have got fewer men to lose than the Russians, and the more people they put into this meat grinder, the more can be killed. And that way, from the Russian point of view, maybe they can force the Ukrainians to commit those reserves piecemeal Therefore, the spring offensive won't be as effective. I think we will not know the answer to who is on the winning side of that equation until spring, until this much fabled offensive appears wherever it does, whatever form it takes. That will be the telling moment. But at the moment, yeah, still very nervous about that place.
Hi everyone, Dom Nicholls here. So a couple of weeks ago, I met the band Antytila, a Ukrainian band who serve in the armed forces. After 2014, they've served in the territorial forces, and after the full-scale invasion last year, they took up their posts as medics. But they've been given special permission. They had to get special permission from the head of the Ukrainian armed forces to come on a European tour. That's because they are seen as global ambassadors spreading their message. So they were able to get out and go on tour. I'm of a certain age now. I do occasionally prop up the wall in the Devonshire Arms in Camden listening to some thrash metal, but not often. But I did venture down to Electric Brixton to go and meet Taras Topolia, the lead singer of Antytila, for an interview. Now, I'm not very good at all this audio lark, as you know, so I had the microphone pointed in the wrong direction. It sounds like I'm talking through a potato, but at least you can hear what Taras has to say. Anyway, hope you enjoy the interview. Oh, and stick around for my cringe-worthy attempt at the only band joke I know at the end. It's awful. So, Taras, thank you so much for sparing the time for the Telegraph. We're here in the Electric Brixton venue in South London. You've got a gig tonight. Start of your European tour today?
I hope, but when you're living in such circumstances, you don't know what will happen next. So we plan to play a couple of concerts in Germany, in Czech Republic, in Poland, in France, in Israel, and we hope that they will happen here.
Now, Antytila started in 2007, I think, and the lineup settled down a couple of years after that, but you've been pretty stable for the last 10 years or so?
Yeah, we started in 2008.
Oh.
Yeah, we released our first album and started our way on a big stage. I finished my studying in university and started to play music as my colleagues. Some of them were working on another works, but they lived it and started to play music with me as Sergio Vucic, my friend and colleague and keyboard player in Antytila band. So everything started from 2008, but music in my life was from 4 or 5 years old, because I remember that I always was singing something inside of me, like it's the melodies in my head and harmonies and lyrics. It was appearing every time. I was walking the streets and singing. I was like sitting in a bus and singing. But if to speak about like official story of Antytila, it starts from 2008.
And after the invasion in 2014, you joined the Territorial Defence Force, I understand, and you've maintained that link with the uniformed services to the extent that you have served over the last year in a medical capacity. Is that correct?
No, it's not absolutely correct. We weren't serving on military forces before the war started. But for us, war started in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea, and the war on the Donbass started, and we became volunteers. We started to find the money, buy different essential equipment, and deliver it directly to the front line to our friends, because our friends became soldiers. They were mobilized. And from that time, we knew a lot. What is happening on the front line, how it works, how the war works. And in that time, we were delivering a lot of medical stuff, medical equipment. And of course, we learned how to use stab blooding, tourniquets, bandages, and everything else. We get some trainings. And that's why when the big full-scale war started, we came to our battalion of Territorial Defense Forces and started to serve like as a paramedical squad, because we were well in this. We knew how to give first aid and how to make our brothers in arms not to die and they to survive. But I want to mark that we were preparing for this war, because our Ukrainian intelligence, United States intelligence and United Kingdom intelligence were predicting that this war will start. We didn't recognize in that moment when it will be start, but we understood that it will. So we prepared for this, and we made a decision to become a part of our future battalion before the war started.
Now, you've spoken in the past about the moral choices you've had to make and how you were big in Russia, and even after February last year, you were still invited back to Russia and to their big music
festival. Нашествие.
And you turned that down, and you said that's cost you $1 million.
If to count, Russia market, it's a huge market. It was a huge market. And before 2014, mostly Ukrainian artists became and get a success only if they were recognized as like a good musicians in Moscow. It was used to do like this. If you want to become popular, you must sing Russian language, and you must to like somehow to get to the Moscow and to get to their airs like in radio and festivals, etc. But when the war started in 2014, we closed this door for us. It was our own decision, moral decision. We didn't count it, the money at the time. We didn't measure it like how many money we will last, because it was not about money. Antytila from the beginning were singing Ukrainian language, and a lot of our songs they are social. They are about our country and about our nation, and we understood from the first day when we get to the stage that singing Ukrainian is very important. It's strategically important. And when the war started, it was only one decision: to shut this door and even not imagine that someday we will play in Moscow or St. Petersburg. I was joking that we can play someday in St. Petersburg or Moscow, even if tickets on our concert we will be able to buy by hryvnias. So it will mean that Russia as a state not exist anymore. So I still not counting like the money that I like among the people that are trading on the markets. It names like FOMO. It's when you expecting to get some money to get some profit, and you are making some stupid things because of this. So we didn't expect that we will get some money in Russia market. So that's why we closed the story and continued to play Ukrainian music in Ukraine. And we gave a lot of concerts. We gathered stadiums in Ukraine. And of course, for us, like European market was closed because it's different languages, I think you understand. But we understood that we will never achieve such big success just only in Ukraine if we will not play like in Russia. But we understood that for us it was impossible because of our thoughts, because what it was in our hearts, and it was our decision.
And you say it was strategically important
Yeah.
that you sing in Ukrainian, in your language, and you close off the Russian market to you. But there's another area in which you can be said to be having a strategic effect, and that is the fact that you are here. So you got permission. You needed special permission to leave the country as a male of fighting age. You needed, and the band needed special permission. How did that go about, and how do you feel about having such a permission and your role now as an ambassador for your country?
It was absolutely frankly a story what happened with Antytila from the first day of the war, because we made this decision inside from our hearts, because we were understood that we must to defend this country. As you was asking before, like the main was, how can I watch eyes of my sons if I will not do what I must to do as a citizen of my country? And the same question had my colleagues, and we decided to take part in the resistance and to handle a gun, handle weapons, rifles, because it was most efficiently way how to resist. Because singing a song on the stage, it is not saving lives. Because we were working, definitely we saved a lot of lives using these arms, using our skills. And also is very important to mark that it was during this year, it was a couple of different periods. So first 3 months it was absolutely insane, and everybody must to do his or her best. So that's why we became soldiers, and we stopped our career. We didn't even think about what to play and how to play. We released on the second day of the war, we released our new album because it was like planned to release. We released this album from the shelter, like it was shelter of battalion. It was like our base. It was underground parking. We just recorded on the selfie camera video and said, come on guys and girls, you can upload our album, but we are continuing to doing our military job. That's all. But what happened next, and it continued happened, that because of that we were quite popular in Ukraine, a lot of media from all over the world started to connect with us. Fortunately, we had an internet in our country. It is like strategically difference between like war that were 8 years ago and this present war, because when you have an opportunity to connect with others and to share the information fast and to make the truth became available everywhere, it helps. So I understood that I must to speak with media. I must to show what is happening, and they to share the truth, because Russian propaganda were very powerful and continue to be very powerful. And everything that they're telling, it is a lie. It is absolutely, it's like inverted world, you know. And I recognize that I must to speak. I must to doing my job, and if somebody wants to speak with me, I must to tell about what is happening. And step by step, very interesting things started to happen. We were serving in Kiev in that time, and all Antytila band were in Kiev. We were not afraid. We didn't escape from the Kiev. Three of us were working as a paramedics. 2 of us were working like a military volunteers, like civilian volunteers that helps military volunteers, because like in our language we don't have such definition like a military volunteers. For us it's like dobrovolets in Ukrainian. Dobrovolets, it means that you took a gun by your will, but volunteer in Ukraine, it means that you are not fighting, but you are helping to fight or helping to survive, for example, for refugees. So we became military volunteers, and our 2 colleagues became civilian volunteers. They were doing everything to help our battalion, to find some different equipment for us and etc. So we were 5 of us were in Kiev, despite of our wives. They were replaced from the Kiev. They escaped at the first day of the war. So, and when we recognized that Ed Sheeran will take a part in concert in Birmingham, our Anna, our friend and colleague, she's PR manager of Antytila. She were in that time in Lviv, and she texted to me or called, I don't remember definitely, and she said, "Oh my God, can you imagine that Ed Sheeran supports Ukraine?" I said, "Okay, what it will be?" She said, "It will be a concert in Birmingham, and a lot of artists will be there, and like Ed Sheeran especially, because she is a big fan of Ed Sheeran, like, and I'm also very love his songs." So, and after that we recorded that video that became viral. It was like fast decision. We were serving in Kiev. I just took a phone and come on guys, let's record it, this video applying, because it was like fast idea. It appeared instantly. Oh, why not to make this bridge between Kiev, unconquered Kiev, and Birmingham? It will be great. We have internet. We had internet in that time, Starlink, you know, and we can play something even in acoustic, you know. And after that, if to answer what you questioned about, after that we became like we get not a well known. We became recognizable in media in United Kingdom, because a lot of people were supporting us. Ed Sheeran got back to us and said, "Come on guys, let's check it out. I want to check it out, your music." But organizers of this concert declined us, and it cased new wave, like of.
So this is the concert for Ukraine last year. That was Birmingham.
Yeah.
And you offered to dial in and perform.
Yeah. From Kiev.
From Kiev.
We wanted to do it from the Krishchatik Square.
But they turned you down, saying that it was a humanitarian concert, and it was too political.
And New Wave started.
From that, Ed Sheeran got in touch and said, "Right, let's do something." And you released the video together.
Yeah.
And from Ed Sheeran, he connected you to Bono, I believe.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask. I mean, that must have been an intensely frustrating time when Concert for Ukraine turned you down. Of all the people who was trying to do the bit through music. So it must have been intensely frustrating, and yet from it came this link to Ed Sheeran and Bono. So actually, looking back on that period, how do you reflect on that?
I want to finish my answer about why I get a permission to be here, why Antytila were replaced from the front line, because the chain of this story took us to that moment when Ed Sheeran invited us to take a part in his concert in Poland. And we came to our commanders, we were serving at that time, we came to our commanders and said, could you imagine Ed Sheeran want we to take a part and sing to Step With Him Alive on the stadium in Poland? And they said, of course guys, you must go, you must sing, because it is the main, because who will sing if you will not sing? Yeah. And they also told us that we must I need to mark that hard, insane period was finished, because first 3 months of the war and second 3 months of the war, it was very hard. But in summer the situation stabilized a little bit. A lot of people get involved in this war as military volunteers. The mobilization was on the road, and our commander said that, guys, you already made what you must to do.
You've made your contribution.
Yeah, you made your contribution, and you uplifted the spirit, and I believe in this, that a lot of people that were watching us and listening us, they became soldiers as we, because they tried to copy what we was doing. So, and our commander said that, guys, you must to go and play concert, of course, and you mustn't go back to the front line. And our chief in commander, Valery Zaluzhny, he gave an order, and we were extracted from a front line to the Poland directly, and after that to the Kiev, and we started to work more like musicians, like civilian volunteers. We continued to help.
You had an order from General Zaluzhny.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's why. But if he will give a new order and he will say, "Come on, guys, you must come back to the front line," we will do this, of course. It's not a discussional, no discussion about this. So about that time, it was, for what I want to say, man, that I didn't enjoy it, everything that was happening at that time, because I couldn't even imagine that someday Bono will call to me, because it is a legend. It is my biggest star in my life. I was listening Bono for, I don't know, when I was born, Bono was a legend already. I was born in 1987.
Oh, Joshua Tree kind of.
It is my favorite album. Yeah.
I'm aware of his work.
Yeah, but I didn't felt that it's something cool happens, because I was in war, and it was one moment ago Bono called, and next moment we move on the front line, and our brother in arms getting injuries and ATC, and it was in fog. Everything was fog in my head. But if to analyze what happened, it's absolutely incredible story that starts from the Kiev, from that video that we recorded, and that it launched a chain of different situations that
brings you here to Brixton at the start of your European tour. And do you think that the audience connect with that side, the war side of your story? They come here for the music, and that's terrific.
I think mostly the audience connected because for our military background, because I yes, of course, for this night I hope that there will be a lot of people from United Kingdom that will come to listen, that are singing Ukrainian language, but mostly I think it happened and we got this audience in United Kingdom and United States because we switched our musical instruments to the weapons and started to serve. But we weren't expecting on this. It wasn't for us the main, and it's still being the main. Our main goal is a victory in this war. And after that, I will enjoy like this popularity and ATC, and I will having fun. Yeah, of course. If you will invite us, of course we will do this and having fun on the stage, and everything. I dream to to take a part in parade on the Cruciatic with my battalion, with winner, when we will get the victory parade on Cruciatic parade, victory parade on Sevastopol, and after that I think I will drink a little bit for 1 week, and after that we can go back to our usually artistic life.
Have you found it a professionally fulfilling time, as in the emotions that are stirred by this warfare? You as an artist, you work with and feed from emotion. So have you found it professionally? I'm not talking morally, but just professionally as an artist, a fulfilling time.
Yeah, I sublimate everything inside me, and our new song Fortress Bakhmut was written under those emotions, and I can tell it that it is a very powerful song that uplifts the spirit of our colleagues, brothers in arms, that gives power them to fight. And of course, for me as an artist, it is very important to collect this emotion. Почекай. To collect this emotion and to create something new that wasn't exist before, like songs and videos. But I don't want to create the dark albums, because Antytila, every whole my life, Antytila and what we were doing, we were trying to bring some light to the people, to uplift them to higher level of consciousness through the metaphors, through the those creativity tools that we use in lyrics and in music. So I want to write a new album in future. It's full of light album, with passion, with hope, and because when we will get this victory, we will need to build new country, rebuild our country and build a kind of new country, and it will need power, lightful power, and it must be in music that we will create in the future. So, but of course I keep inside a lot of black emotions that it was. For example, I was unlocking telephone of my killed friend by his fingerprints. He was already died. He was cold. His body was cold. But I was need to do this. It was on my birthday. So I hope that, despite of my English, not correct, because I try to share information about Ukraine, and every time when I'm giving interviews, I'm telling that we are not ready to lose this war. We are definitely will win this war. It's just a matter of time, because we have no another choice, first of all, because we are fighting not just for future of our country, we're fighting future of whole Europe. We have the same values, the same principles. And if we will lose, the world order will fall. Because it's not right when somebody can use the power and force in other countries and other nations and making them down on their knees just because he or she wants. It's not right. That's why I know that we will get this victory. Because whole world is standing by Ukraine. And we continue to fight. You must to mark it. That we will do everything that we can to get this victory. On different levels. On different levels. From the trenches till our president. We are working like one machine. Like one organism. Like one... And I hope that we will meet in the future after the victory. And...
I look forward to coming to the Victory of Light gig or whatever.
Yeah. So.
Taras, thank you so much indeed, and
thank you.
Good luck for the gig tonight.
Thank you.
The only joke I know, the only band joke I know, I just want to see if it translates English to Ukrainian. What do you call somebody who hangs around with a band?
I can understand. Cannot.
Anna Dolinska, PR manager. No?
The drummer.
Drummer. I don't understand.
It clearly doesn't translate to Ukrainian. It's a stupid English joke.
I will translate. Це дуже англійська жарт. Він каже, як ти називаєш людину who hang out around the band? Who hang out around the band? Як ти називаєш людину, яка, крутить бендом? То треба якесь проєкт. Я кажу, я PR-менеджер, no, drummer.
Yes, of course.
Ukraine the Latest is an original podcast from The Telegraph. To stay on top of all of our Ukraine news, analysis and dispatches from the ground, subscribe to The Telegraph. You can get your first 3 months for just £1 at www.telegraph.co.uk/Ukraine the Latest. Or sign up to Dispatches, our Ukraine newsletter, which brings stories from our award-winning foreign correspondents straight to your inbox. We also have a Ukraine live blog on our website where you can follow updates as they come in throughout the day, including insights from regular contributors to this podcast. You can listen to this conversation live at 1 p.m. each weekday on Twitter Spaces. Follow The Telegraph on Twitter so you don't miss it. To our listeners on YouTube, please note that due to issues beyond our control, there is sometimes a delay between broadcast and upload, so if you want to hear Ukraine the Latest as soon as it is released, do refer to podcast apps. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider following Ukraine the Latest on your preferred podcast app. And if you have a moment, leave a review, as it helps others find the show. You can also get in touch directly to ask questions or give comments by emailing ukrainepod@telegraph.co.uk. We do read every message. And you can contact us directly on Twitter. You can find our Twitter handles in the description for this episode. Ukraine the Latest is produced by Louisa Wells and Giles Gear, and today on Twitter, Emily Hill.